the sun is blaring in my eyes, but I'm afraid to like move and like change my connection here. Do it like this.
Okay, perfect. So we're live. So Terry, do you want to start us off with the ethics discussion?
Sure. So this week's focus says it's on defining ethics as a group, exploring how ethics shape leadership and how ethical behavior is reflected in public leadership. So reading the chapters that we have, and based off of my personal experience, they're quite the same. That leaders are held accountable for our actions of others, which is not just ourselves, but of those that we lead, which is sometimes tough because we want to do what's right. And then also we want to make sure that we're doing what's right for the company. So sometimes you could be in a situation where you feel what you're doing is right, but it's not always to par with maybe rules or ethical behavior of a company. So with that, we have to decide what kind of, as a leader, what kind of power that we're going to employ as we work with our groups and with our followers. And then we know that ethical failure happens when we decide to do something that may not be right with other groups, settings, our own settings with the company. So then there's different types of ethical behavioral, moral sensitivity. So, like, for example, I work with lots of train crews and whatnot, but I also work with other railroad companies in the same sense that our trains run on their railroad and their trains run on our road. So sometimes I may not fill them in on everything that I know that would sometimes help them versus helping me. But sometimes I just have to give them what they need to know rather than the whole picture. So is that an ethical issue? Probably not, but it could be considered that way to some.
Yeah. I totally agree. Like what you're saying, sometimes you have to kind of choose, like, if you're going to do sometimes what's better for your company or for the business or what's ethical. And I think that that's like the biggest issue that most like big companies and people who are public leaders and in public positions have to face. And it's just, I mean, sometimes it can just be a really blurred line between. I took a business ethics and law class a couple terms ago, and it's just, there's a lot of situations where one tiny thing that a leader or a company can do can seem like it's not a big deal, but it can actually be an ethical dilemma or an issue, and it can step on other people's toes, and it's just a really blurry situation. But I think that that's really the big thing for like public positions is they have to decide like what is their where do they stand? Like, are they always going to do everything 100% by the ethics book, or are they going to make decisions that are going to be beneficial maybe to their company or to whatever their position is, and have to deal with the fact that personally they're not abiding by ethics. So
right.
It can just
and there's times where we do have to be unethical. So it reminds me of a commercial where the guy's in the kitchen reading the newspaper. It's in the morning. His wife comes out with a new dress on. I don't know if you remember this. And she's like, honey, do I look fat in this dress? Without even looking up, he says, you betcha. And she, of course, gets mad, but is it unethical or is it ethical if you would have lied to her or not? So, I mean, there's lines like that I'm sure we all cross every day.
That's a good example.
Yeah,
because he's lying, but he would have. If he lied, then he would have, spared her feelings. But
there's a section in the book, and it touches on ethical perspectives, and there's one called deontological ethics, and it says that in this ethics, it believes to follow universal truths that we discover through our intuition or reason. So I feel like everyone's different and perspectives are different. So then people's opinions on what's ethical or what's not, what's best, what's not, can vary. And I think that kind of plays into like how ethics shape leadership. So like if you have a group of people with all these values and beliefs, you're more likely to find a leader that best suits them for their values and beliefs. And so like, for example, your political leader, you're more likely, say you're part of the Democratic Party, you're more likely to follow someone who has been shaped by the ethics that you have and your party has, than vice versa.
Madison, what are your thoughts?
Actually, tagging on to that, so I thought it was interesting to learn about utilitarianism, which is the idea that you care more about when the situation allows you to care more about the vast majority of people rather than a smaller amount of people. I also talked about or learned this in like a management course at the business school last semester, I think, and I definitely think that applies to leadership because, again, that's the issue, controversy with ethics is that it's not necessarily like a right or wrong kind of situation. It's your perspective really of just making a choice. Terry, I liked your example about, the lady in the dress. Yes, obviously lying is not a good thing. However, I don't know. Again, that's a controversy. Do you lie if it technically doesn't hurt anyone? That's where ethics definitely comes into play. So I definitely thought it was interesting to read this chapter. Obviously, relating it to leadership, it's important to keep that stuff in mind. Yeah.
But you're right, Madison. Like when you said, I feel, it's more of what society deems is ethical and unethical behavior. Like on page 336 in our text, it says, ethics refer to standards of moral conduct, and then to judgments whether human behavior is right and wrong. But I really think that's society decides that, and like in that situation that Terry provided with that example, there are going to be times where is it ethical and non-ethical. But I want to bring up the fact that there's challenges to the ethical leadership. And I think one of the major key aspects in that is the challenges of privilege, because I feel like any leader can go into it with a good mind frame and perspective on things. But once they're reaping these benefits that the other people in the group don't get, they start to maybe become greedy. They start to make choices based off of unethical behavior because, they just don't, they have the power and they have the privilege. So I think that's a major focus, like a challenge that they're going to have to work through. I know there's other ones, but, the text provided us with a good example, like in regards to the public leadership and how ethical behavior affects that. I mean, Adolf Hitler was able to cause a lot of, the Holocaust, obviously. I don't want to talk about the deaths, but it's just that is a perfect form of how somebody took their power and took their privilege and completely changed people's perspective on what was ethical and unethical, and it destroyed millions of lives. So definitely those things, I think privilege and power definitely affect any leader, and those have to be the main focus to keep them ethical as humanly possible. So that's
look at Enron and what got us into
what's that, Terry?
I was going to say, look at Enron and some of the issues that got us into the situations we got into when we went into our depression in 98 or 2008. I mean, a lot of ethical issues there.
Yeah.
And should we note that Jordan was unable to make it with us today, but he's going to comment on this?
Yeah.
Do the alternate assignment. Do we still need more time? Where are we at?
We have just about 3 minutes. Does anybody else have any more comments? Anybody have any experiences?
Oh yeah, because we're used to Jordan participating.
So I just watched the video Dr. Michael shared about updates for this week, and she also mentioned, other than Enron, she mentioned Wells Fargo, because that was definitely pretty recent, where I'm sorry, I kind of already forgot the situation, but I want to say they were messing with people's accounts to make them seem like they had more revenue in their system, and I don't know, it entirely, but it was obviously unethical because they were doing things without their customers' consent. But they were doing it just to, because they didn't think that they would find out.
Yeah.
There was another time that their gas station was caught charging all its customers 1 cent. 1 cent. So you think like, okay, they stole 1 cent from me. That's not unethical behavior while it's 1 cent. But they did it to the tune of like hundreds of thousands of dollars. But, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's 1 penny. It's wrong. But does 1 penny affect everyone? But I guess we, you know, going forward, like we wouldn't want everyone to have that mind frame. But
I'm just jealous.
I don't know. I don't know whatever happened with that.
Another,
but just to let you know that as far as leadership, ethical concerns 100% shape, you know, organizations and groups, and it's all based off of, you know, basically the conduct of the leader. And they, you know, there's a moral compass that we all need to consider when becoming a leader, and we definitely need to pay attention to those challenges and try to figure out how we can navigate through those in order to not, you know, do unethical behavior. And
I agree. I've talked a lot about where I work. Like I work with Thirsty Lion. I'm a server. And the business ethics they present is one that I find myself represented by. Like I can really stand by it, and I really appreciate all that the leaders in our company do for all of us and consider all of us. And because previous to this, I worked at a different restaurant, and our leader there was not the same way. She was very much wrapped up in her own world and didn't really have a moral compass for her employees or even really her customers. Like she did a lot of things that just were untruthful and deceitful and selfish. So that kind of really destroyed the work environment. So a lot of us left, and I don't know how they're doing now, but I read their Yelp reviews and they're all terrible. So it's just not a successful, smooth running business. And I think ethics really plays into that. So it's just my personal experience.
Awesome. So we're at over 12 minutes. So does anybody else have any closing comments?
Just that, in my view, ethics also play into moral character, moral choices. To me, they go hand in hand. Some people, it appears they have no morals. Whether they do or not, I guess there's no real judgment to find out other than their actions. So with that said, actions a lot of times do speak louder than words.
Judge based off of action.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of good manipulators out there.
Oh, yeah.
All right, awesome. I'm going to go ahead and stop this, and then we can end it.